Folks, the Department of Justice says the Memphis Police Department consistently has violated the U.S. Constitution due to a pattern of misconduct involving discrimination and excessive force. Kristen Clarke, the Assistant Attorney General of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, explained everything today during a news conference in Memphis.
Based on a comprehensive investigation of the City of Memphis and the Memphis Police Department, the Justice Department has found a pattern or practice of conduct that violates people's civil and constitutional rights. Our investigative team includes career attorneys and staff from the Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and more than a dozen experts who specialize in police department management, use of force, statistics, and other areas. This investigation was comprehensive and exhaustive. We interviewed dozens of police department officers and many city employees, as well as hundreds of community members and local organizations. We reviewed hundreds of incidents, watched hundreds of body-worn camera videos, read thousands of documents, and conducted statistical analyses of police data regarding officer activities and enforcement. Based on this investigation, we found that the police in Memphis use excessive force, that they stop, search, and arrest people unlawfully, that their policies have a discriminatory effect on Black people, and that they discriminate against people with behavioral health disabilities. Furthermore, we are also concerned that MPD officers unnecessarily escalate encounters with some of the most vulnerable members of this community, its children. Many dedicated police officers in Memphis regularly risk their lives to keep people safe and to protect their rights. The practices I described, however, violate the Constitution and federal law. They harm and demean people, and they promote distrust, undermining the fundamental safety mission of a police department. The city and police department can and must correct these issues. First, the police department must stop using excessive force. Officers often make tough choices in stressful circumstances, but in Memphis, we have found that officers often use unwarranted, serious force in response to low-level violations or traffic offenses. For example, officers tackled a man and held him down by his neck for littering in a park. Officers routinely punish people who flee or don't immediately follow directions. Second, the police department must end unlawful stops, searches, and arrests. Without reasonable suspicion or probable cause to believe the people they stop have contraband or are dangerous or are a flight risk, officers often frisk, search, handcuff, or hold them. For example, police detained a Black man outside of a dollar store and struck him in the leg with a baton and pepper sprayed him in the face. Dollar stores in the area had seen a spate of robberies, but police had no reason to suspect that this man had anything to do with them. Further, without evidence that someone's car contains drugs or weapons, officers often tow and impound the vehicles. Third, the police department must stop policies that have a disproportionate effect on Black people in this community. We uncovered racial disparities that cannot be explained by differences in driving behavior. We found that MPD cites or arrests Black adults for marijuana possession at 5.2 times the rate of white adults, based on data from 2018 to 2023. Police cite Black drivers for equipment violations like tinted windows at several times the rate of white drivers. And between 2018 and 2023, they arrested 121 Black children for disorderly conduct compared to just one child during that time period. Fourth, the city and the police department must stop discriminating in their response to people with behavioral health disabilities. When someone in Memphis calls 911 for a medical emergency, medical professionals respond. But if someone calls 911 for a behavioral health emergency, the police respond, even when there is no evident safety risk. One woman encountered police officers 169 times over 5 years. In nearly 95% of these encounters, there were no criminal charges. Instead, police brought her to hospital care. Crisis intervention teams began in Memphis with officers specifically trained in responding to behavioral health calls. Nevertheless, we found that even these officers still used force without justification and without first trying to resolve situations peacefully. One crisis team member acquired the nickname Taserface for his inordinate use of the tool. These team members routinely escalated encounters and used unnecessary force against people with behavioral disabilities, even children. Crisis intervention officers taunted, threatened, and used force against an 8-year-old boy with a history of mental health treatment. Children often suffer harsh treatment from the Memphis Police Department. Officers approach kids aggressively, they use profane language with them, and inflict needless, unreasonable force on them. In one especially disturbing case, a 16-year-old Black girl called the police to report that she had been assaulted. When officers arrived on the scene, she declined to hand over her phone. The police handcuffed her and she became agitated. The officers responded by threatening her. Ultimately, they grabbed her and pushed her onto the ground. This kind of encounter potentially harms our children more than the similar conduct harms adults, creating risk of serious long-term harm such as post-traumatic stress, diminished academic performance, or future delinquent behavior. The misconduct that we observe offends the dignity of Memphis residents. It creates stigma and trauma. The practical results of the police department's misconduct often include loss of transportation and consequently employment and separation of families. But let me be clear, these tactics do not make Memphis safer. Discriminatory policing erodes the relationship between the community and the police, making it harder for law enforcement to do their jobs, to detect and solve crime or promote public safety. The violations our investigation uncovered stem from Memphis Police Department's deficient policies, supervision, training, and accountability systems. For example, the department uses traffic stops as a crime reduction strategy, but has not adequately supervised those traffic stops or meaningfully assessed whether this approach actually reduces crimes or violates rights. Further, officers lack clear guidance on what they can and cannot do. Supervisors have ignored or excused clear legal violations. The department does not conduct thorough, objective investigations into alleged misconduct. The city has noted the cost of police reform and consent decrees, but the pattern or practice of constitutional violations our investigation identified costs the city too, and will not be stopped by hopeful words or preliminary changes. Achieving meaningful constitutional policing reform costs time and resources, but not implementing systemic reforms also imposes enormous costs, cost in terms of citizens' rights that are trampled, personal and financial costs and injuries and deaths due to excessive, unnecessary use of force, cost in diminished public safety, and millions of dollars in legal judgments against the city due to constitutional violations. When the Justice Department works with police departments to achieve reform, these costs decrease. For example, our work in cities such as Seattle, Albuquerque, and Baltimore has led not only to declines in use of excessive force, but also reductions in violent crime. We stand ready to continue working with the city. The people of Memphis deserve fair, transparent, non-discriminatory constitutional policing, nothing less. We are prepared to work together to write a new chapter for this city. But make no mistake, the pattern or practice of misconduct that we found in Memphis must end. And federal law authorizes us to sue for an injunction if necessary to accomplish that objective.
Now, the report was always supposed to be released today, but the city of Memphis actually got ahead of this report being released yesterday by commenting. Well, after they did so on yesterday, the city of Memphis told the Department of Justice they would not enter into a consent decree. Earlier today, Memphis Mayor Paul Young explained why.
Let me be clear that I believe that even one incident of mistreatment by the police is one too many. The report the DOJ released last night, it's going to be difficult to read. Some of the types of incidents that are described are simply not acceptable, and our hearts go out to every person who has been impacted by those actions. Hear me when I say these things, that policing in Memphis must always be ever evolving, constantly improving, and I'm confident that our team is ready to further the work of creating ongoing change. We believe that adjustments we've already begun making must continue and that they must expand. It's my job as mayor to fight for the best interest of our entire community, every member, and that's what I'm here to do today. After carefully considering the information that we received from DOJ, we didn't believe that entering into any agreement in principle or consent decree right now, before even thoroughly reading the DOJ report, would be in the best interest of our community. It's crucial that the city has the time to do a thorough review and respond to the findings before agreeing to anything that could become a long-term financial burden to our residents and could, in fact, actually slow down our ongoing efforts to continuously improve our police department. The consent decree in Chicago has cost their city more than $500 million. The consent decree in Seattle has cost their city more than $200 million. In New Orleans, their consent decree has cost them more than $100 million. And from what I understand, in many cases, consent decrees are in place for at least 10 years or more. In some of these cities, crime has actually increased under a consent decree. And we can't risk that here, not in the city that I love, the city that made me everything that I am. We aren't alone in wanting to pursue a smarter way to make improvements. And we firmly believe that there is a better way. We believe we can make more effective and meaningful change by working together with community input and independent national experts than we can with a bureaucratic, costly, and complicated federal government consent decree. While the review period of this DOJ report predates my tenure as mayor, make no mistake that this administration takes the DOJ findings seriously, and we're going to review this report with an open mind to the recommendations. And while no police department is perfect, we have to strive to become as close as possible. Protecting the interests of this community is my top priority. And while we have much work to do, we are on the right track. As citywide crime has been down 13.5%, the Part 1 crimes and the more violent, those more serious crimes are down 19%. We've already begun implementing several changes within MPD, and we're committed to further progress. Our promise to Memphis and Memphians is that once the findings report is thoroughly reviewed, we'll work collaboratively with our community, local civil rights stakeholders, independent national experts, and the DOJ to develop an effective improvement plan that transcends what is undoubtedly a bureaucratic and costly consent decree. We're working with the team now to arrange a series of town hall meetings so that we can get community and stakeholder feedback on the DOJ's report, as well as the path we will take to ensure an even better MPD and a better Memphis. I want you all to know and make no mistake that we're committed to ensuring that we have a best-in-class police department that respects all citizens. And to sum it up, we agree that our police department should always strive for improvement. However, we don't believe that the consent decree is the most effective way or efficient way to achieve the results that our community needs and deserves. We believe that by working with all of you in our community, we can faster and more effectively work towards the outcomes that we all desire. And while I haven't been able to thoroughly read the DOJ report yet, I'm happy to take your questions about our response to the DOJ request that we immediately sign the agreement in principle towards the consent decree.
What? So, folks, so you heard that. Now, here's what's interesting. This is what Paul Young actually said when he was running for mayor. Again, let me stress that. This is what he said when he was running for mayor. This was a Q&A with the Memphis Flyer. The question was asked, MPD is currently under a civil rights investigation by the Department of Justice. How do you plan to ensure MPD treats all of Memphis' citizens fairly? The mayor said, quote, I welcome the investigation that's underway. It will help us identify national best practices for ensuring that everyone is being treated with dignity and respect. Leadership is making sure that I set the tone as mayor with my willingness to comply and willingness to engage. We want that to resonate with the chief of MPD and everyone that falls under her. Purview, the investigation will also give us declarative actions that we can take to ensure that we're doing exactly what we want. So again, when you talk about this particular consent decree, there have been consent decrees that have taken place all across the country. And so I want to, you heard, of course, him talk about Seattle and the cost to taxpayers. Bob Scales is the CEO of Police Strategies. He joins us now. Okay, well, we don't have him yet, so guys, let's get him up. Let me bring him on my panel. I want to go to my panel, Reese Colbert, the host of the Reese Colbert Show, Sirius XM Radio, joining us out of Washington, D.C. Lauren Burt, she is with Black Press USA, but also owner of Black Virginia News, joining us from Arlington. Dr. Greg Carr, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University out of Washington, D.C. Lauren, I want to start with you. So it's very interesting. You heard Mayor Young there lay out, oh, this is what the cost is to these cities. You know what the mayor didn't say, Lauren? He didn't say how much abuse cases have cost taxpayers in Memphis. He didn't say how much money Chicago has had to pay out from police abuse. He didn't talk about the Holman Street location in Chicago where they were holding people and the lawyers didn't even know. It was essentially Chicago's own Guantanamo Bay. He didn't talk about how much it has cost Seattle for a lot of these settlements. And so it's interesting to hear him talk about, then he says, well, and also these consent decrees, crime has gone up. Let's also be honest. Crime has also gone up because you've had police officers around this country who don't like it when they're held accountable. So what do? They stop policing. And so and let's not talk about the Trump Department of Justice, where they said, well, Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, they're going to be pulling back on consent decrees because it was hurting the morale of cops. At the end of the day, you have to have something that is going to fix these problems or try to alleviate these problems. And the reality is, you cannot leave this up to police departments in the cities alone, because that's how the problem started in the first place.
Yeah, and also, interestingly enough, the other thing he didn't mention, in a 64% Black city, Memphis. I mean, I was looking that up as we were waiting, and I did not know that Memphis was 64% Black. I knew that it was probably majority Black, but 64%. He makes zero mention on those stop and frisk stats, which damn well is going to be almost all Black people. When they did it in New York, which is not 64% Black, it was like all Black people that they were stopping for stop and frisk. And the other thing is, Memphis, just like all these other cities, putting up all these cameras, which is millions and millions and millions of dollars. The other reason why crime goes up is you have a complete lack of investment on the front end when it comes to our young people. When you have that lack of investment, you pay on the back end. In some way, you are going to pay on the back end, typically with incarceration. But as we know, incarceration is a business. So that little speech that he just gave, that preemptive speech, is the reason why the Democratic Party is in need of a major, major reset, a major reset, because he, of course, was elected on the with black voters. He was elected on the back of black folks, and then he turns around and effectively kisses the ass of the police department, knowing full well that the people who are living with the problems with the police department predominantly are going to be African American. I mean, there's nothing more ironic than that. He's voted into office by black people, and then he turns around and abandons those voters with regard to policy on this issue. It's outrageous. His little stupid speech was ridiculous. He didn't even give a little bit of a tip of the cap of what goes on in some of these communities with regard to their relationship with the police, particularly with regard to Fourth Amendment violation and stop and frisk, which that's an easy thing to say because those stats are usually pretty obvious. I mean, that was outrageous. That was absolutely embarrassing and outrageous. And that's the reason why so many voters get frustrated, not only with the Democratic Party, but specifically black leadership around this country when you see something like that.
I sat there and again I listened to all of that, Reese, and I'm sitting there, and I guess for me, what is so bothersome is real people. Real people are affected. The mayor's citizens, and by the way, we reached out to the mayor to get him on the show. We reached out, let me know, Carol, to every city council member. Nobody was available to come on. Now, we had city council members who came on after Tyree Nichols was killed. Oh, they had lots to say after Tyree Nichols was killed. But when this report comes out, because this report goes beyond Tyree Nichols, this report talks about the culture of a police department. And the reason, and this is a 70-plus page report, and the reason these reports are important is because this is not taking the Memphis PD. In this report, they actually detail how the internal affairs does faulty and crappy investigations. That's the job of internal affairs, to hold the police department accountable. And so, see, the mayor say, well, this may get in the way of things that we're already putting in place. And again, you notice two things that he did right there. And politicians do this all the time. Okay? Oh, this might cause crime to go up. How? Police state. And then they always like to use money and cost against doing something. Okay, so it's going to be costly. Why is it going to be costly? Because will the consent decree demand more training? Will the consent decree call for police accountability? See, all this little double talk I can't stand, when the most important thing here that the mayor should be saying is that thank you for doing this report, because there's nothing more paramount than the safety of our citizens, and they should not be under attack by people who the taxpayers are paying.
Absolutely. Let's just be clear. Mayor Young is full of shit. He's completely full of shit. He's trying to get ahead of the report by saying, oh, well, we don't know if we're going to enter into it before we read the report. Well, you didn't have to make a comment before you read the report. You could have waited and saw what was in there, and then you could have made your statement. But the reality is that to say that all this money has been spent on consent decrees is not an indictment on consent decrees. It's an indictment on policing. It's an indictment on the idea that if you throw more money at police officers, at training, and at other programs, that's going to reform the system. That's what it's really an indictment on. Seattle has a budget of over $300 million a year on policing. And so the $200 million they spent over a decade that didn't.
Oh, wait, hold on, Reese. 40% of Memphis's total budget goes to public safety, goes to
There
police
you go.
department.
Yep.
40%.
Mm-hmm. And so what the mayor really is getting at without saying it, because I don't think he has the balls to say it, and certainly he's clearly beholden to the police chief that was standing behind him, skinning and grinning, is that they don't have the balls to say that the solution isn't in putting more money in police programs. The solution is putting more money into the community. The solution is actually getting outside of a police response to things that are happening in the community, like what Kristen Clarke detailed, how these so-called police officers that are supposed to be there and specifically trained to respond to mental health issues, but they out there taser facing people. What kind of shit is that? So, to the extent that consent decrees are a problem, it's because consent decrees have the basic premise that police officers can be reformed, that police departments can be reformed, that there is a degree of oversight, that there is a degree of programs that could be put in place to govern the police officers who conduct themselves in deplorable manners, who discriminate and wreak havoc on their communities that they're supposed to protect. That's really what there is an indictment of. So they should actually be grateful that these consent decrees are there that help inflate the already bloated police budgets under the false notion that they can be reformed. Clearly, they cannot. That's the real issue. And for him to sit up there and gaslight the predominantly Black residents who are victims of this kind of racial profiling, this is not a safety issue. It is a quality of life issue. If you're a Black person who cannot walk down the street, who cannot call the cops, who cannot be minding your damn business without getting harassed and stopped and have these pretextual charges being thrown at you, bullshit charges, that's a quality of life issue. That's not a public safety issue. So yeah, the reason why crime hasn't gone down in those places is because they're putting the money in the wrong places. They're putting the money in the police departments instead of back into the communities.
And, and Greg, and here again, when I listen to these politicians, and I don't care whether they're Black, whether they're white, whether they're Latino, Asian, old, when they go crime, crime, crime. Okay, so if you really want to talk about crime, okay, Mayor, what is your economic plan? What is your education plan? Everybody, we're talking about Memphis. We're talking about the very city the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in when he was there fighting on behalf of sanitation workers who were being grossly underpaid and being disrespected. This city has had economic apartheid for the last 60 plus years. And that's the question that should be asked. What is the median family income of a Black family in Memphis compared to a white family? See, when they stand here, and again, it's all about scare tactics. Oh, crime could go up, crime could go up. Because what you have in America, you have an unwillingness of people to hold cops accountable for their awful, bad behavior. And then the DOJ comes in, and their job is not to paint a rosy picture, but to paint an honest picture. And here they lay out a damning report that details the violation of the constitutional rights of citizens. And the mayor comes out and goes, oh, this stuff just might be too costly. Well, tell me this then. What's the cost of Tyree Nichols' life? What's the cost of another brother or sister who is beaten? Tell me, Mayor Young, what is the cost to a family when a young brother and sister has been traumatized by abusive behavior? Are we going to plot an actuary table and then lay out a cost there? See, I'm sick of these people talking about, oh, how much these things are going to cost when people don't want to be beaten. People don't want to be assaulted. People don't want their constitutional rights to be held against them. And the mayor stands there after being elected by the people. Well, I looked at the cost in Chicago. It cost $500 million. The police abuse settlements in Chicago alone are approaching $1 billion.
Right.
And Mayor Paul Young is complaining that the consent decree has cost them $500 million. Well, please, Mayor Young, please tell the Black families and the Latino families in Chicago that the lives of their sons and daughters are not that valuable because it's going to hurt your city budget.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, let's start with first things first. Good to see Kristen Clarke there. One of, if not the last times, we'll see her doing some actual work. For people who thought that both parties are the same and blah, blah, blah. That's why we can't have nice things in the United States of America. You could have had her as the Attorney General. And of course, the hillbilly horde in Tennessee, through the combination of voter suppression and disinformation, delivered that state, my home state, to the white nationalists and the fascists who will make sure that there won't be any more consent decrees, as Robert said yesterday on the show, maybe ever. So we can just put that aside. Mayor Young, brother, blink twice if you're a hostage. I think we all know that you're a hostage. Because he doesn't care. Mayor Young wanted to be the mayor of Memphis. The question is, who bought that seat for him? And that'll be the rich people who live in the suburbs surrounding the city of Memphis. And if there are Black people outside the city of Memphis, just like that white nationalist Jason Mumpower tried to take that little town of Mason in West Tennessee away for the developers, that's who owns Mayor Young. Mayor Young evoked Chicago. Let's be very clear. There are several words that always should inform our thinking on this. One is implementation. Another is investments, and another is expenditures. So let's talk about Chicago just for a split second. $667 million Chicago set aside between 20 and 24 for police reforms because of those consent decree there. As you say, that's less than $1 billion. That's less than the lawsuits, but let's be very clear. How much of that money was actually spent? Brandon Johnson, 2 weeks ago yesterday, put together a proposed 2025 budget for the city of Chicago. It would slash by 13% the number of employees charged with implementing the federal court order requiring the Chicago Police Department to stop routinely violating residents' constitutional rights. So he's going to slash the budget. But guess what? That's not even the biggest story. The Chicago Police Department to date has met just 9% of the court order's requirements during that 5-year period. They've spent less than 25% of the allocated budget over that same period, according to their own audits. So it isn't that they've encumbered the money to be spent. They haven't spent the money. But let's put a cherry on top of that. The cuts include the Office of Constitutional Policing Reform. That's going to be chopped in half to about $3.7 million, slashing that workforce to implement now by 57 employees. But guess what? He's proposing, Mayor Johnson is, $194.6 million on top of the money that has been encumbered for 2025. He's going to spend almost $200 million. What? But guess what that number comes up to? It's a 3.2% increase in total spending, but those additional funds will be just enough to cover the cost of employee raises required by the city contract by the Fraternal Order of Police. Mayor Young, blink twice if you're being held hostage by the damn police union. Not only have they not spent the money in the consent decrees, then to the degree that they're increasing budget for the police department is going to raise this because of that funky ass police union. These paddle rollers are out of control. Not enough people are voting to put politicians not your friend. We could reach into Mayor Young's guts, pull him inside out and make him do what we wanted if enough people got involved in the political process. There's enough blame to go around in this, but I don't blame Mayor Young. He's just a hostage and he's just a politician. And he's going to say whatever he needs to do to keep his job. We don't know whether consent decrees work or not because the money for implementation hasn't been spent.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.